Tonight, tell me if you heard this one before. We're heading for another showdown on Capitol Hill. Tomorrow morning, the former White House counsel, Don McGahn, he's scheduled to testify before Congress, but the White House today said, no, he's not coming. That's just one issue we'll discuss with a former federal prosecutor. Then a bunch of new numbers are out, and they tell us a lot about the state of our country, the presidential race, and also the issues that the American public cares about. Plus, yet another disturbing immigration story. You got 55,000 children who are here legally, and they could be getting evicted from their homes. That's all because the government wants to penalize their parents. Tonight, we'll break it down. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us this Monday evening. And we start this week a lot like we ended last week, frankly, a battle over the Mueller Report and the White House stonewalling the Democrats. Now, the House Judiciary Committee, they've scheduled a hearing for tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., that with former White House counsel Don McGahn to testify. Now, you may remember McGahn, he spent 30 hours with Mueller's team, so he's considered a key witness. But the guest of honor, he's not going to show. That despite a subpoena. The White House, it turns out, they've instructed McGahn not to comply, and the Department of Justice, they have the president's back. The DOJ saying McGahn can't be compelled to testify because he has immunity since he's a former presidential advisor. Chairman Jerry Nadler threatening McGahn with contempt, plus Michael Flynn. He is back in the news again. The former national security advisor who pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI, then agreed to cooperate with Mueller. Newly released court documents show that Flynn assisted Mueller's probe into obstruction of justice. They say people connected to the Trump administration or to Congress contacted Flynn to possibly impact his willingness to cooperate. There are even voicemails that could be made public. Now, that could possibly be added to the laundry list on your screen, which details the obstruction attempts spelled out in the Mueller report. Now, former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi, he joins us to talk about those and other issues. And Gene, let's start off with those tapes here and what we may or may not learn regarding Flynn. How significant could it be if somebody connected to the campaign or to Congress told him either don't share, say this, coach the testimony in one way, shape, or form?
I prosecuted and charged a state prosecutor for obstruction, and I used a tape to build my case. So whenever you have someone's voice recorded, it's always explosive, and it's always a significant event for the prosecutor and any judge or jury. Now let's go back to what may be on that tape. If Flynn had pleaded guilty, and there's a communication from Trump's lawyer or a member of Congress basically to say, hey, what are you doing cooperating, or trying to pressure him not to cooperate fully, if not lie, that is pure categorical obstruction of justice. And Richard, here's the more important thing. If the attorney for Trump was instructed by Trump to leave that message, the attorney-client privilege is waived and punctured and vitiated because that's the crime fraud exception. It's very crucial what happened on that voicemail.
You know, I thought it was really telling that the president in his tweet storm this weekend said, well, if somebody only told me that this guy Flynn was under investigation, you know, would have been nice to know. First off, that's a lie on many fronts. He was warned repeatedly, even before he made Flynn a part of his incoming administration, that this was a guy with a lot of baggage, even before he made him part of the campaign. That said, though, he never says any of those things unless, at least going by the last 2.5 years, he's worried about the next shoe to drop here. So what did you take, at least in the back and forth of the president here? Certainly seemed to me about a worried client.
Well, here's what I'm going to say to the President of the United States. Please, please keep tweeting, because your tweetings are not helping you. And I can't help but believe that his attorneys and his advisors are telling him, shut up. You're only hurting yourself. So every tweet he issues can be Exhibit 1, 2, and 3 in any potential trial.
Let's talk about the next player here, Don McGahn. First off, White House lets him cooperate, testifies 30 hours with the Mueller team. Now the president says, nope. And DOJ, of course, Barr with having his back, don't go before Congress, don't cooperate. All of a sudden, this is privileged. Isn't that, wouldn't that have probably should have been exercised long before his appearance before Congress tomorrow? If you're going to let him go talk to the Mueller probe, why can't he talk to Congress?
You can't call back a waiver of a privilege. You cannot. And the president, for whatever reason, waived his right to invoke executive privilege. And now that he's waived it, he can't call it back. If I give the FBI consent to search my house without a search warrant, and they find 5 kilos of cocaine in my basement, I can't say, oh, I take back that consent. You can't do that. So that is the big hurdle in preventing Don McGahn from testifying in front of Congress. That's a huge hurdle.
So what do you think happens? All these folks, and I get to my broader issue, the subpoena's being issued, the president said, nope, never mind, I'm not going to comply, we're not going to cooperate, X, Y aren't going to testify. Take me, if we're in round 1 or 2 here, tell me how this gets decided, either by the judges here or by decision. At the end, do we get to hear who shall decide? Does it go before the courts, and when?
I think it's going to go before the courts. And there's one thing that executive privilege requires, according to the 20 to 30 cases, and of course Nixon's the seminal one, the Nixon tape case, is the parties, the White House and Congress, have to make attempts to what they call accommodation. They sort of have to work it out. The courts do not want the parties to go into court without making good faith attempts to accommodate each other in terms of scheduling and the topics. So you're going to see some back and forth, some shadow boxing, if you will, between the Congress and the White House. And then if the White House digs its heels further, you're going to see contempt, and you're going to see a referral to the Justice Department for criminal prosecution. That's going nowhere. But then you'll see a lawsuit. This could take a few months, probably into next year.
Gene, I saw an interesting piece by the former FBI Assistant Director for Counterintelligence, and the whole idea of investigating the investigators. Now, to a layperson, you say, wait a minute. We just spent a couple years here with the Mueller probe. The ink's barely dry. I heard senators say probably 97% of us haven't even read the report. But yet the most driving issues for the GOP on the Hill are to investigate the investigators, and a lot of misinformation about how these probes work. His contention was that this is really dangerous, and it can do severe harm to both the credibility and the ability of the Justice Department to do these investigations. From your perspective, as a guy who worked at DOJ, when you hear this hair on fire from some of the folks in the Hill, we have to know what led into this. And in fact, the implication is there's some grand cabal about going out of their way to go get the president. Talk about what that really means for the folks who work there and how this is supposed to work with checks and balances.
What it does is, and I worked with DOJ for almost 30 years, it has a chilling effect when the prosecutors and the agents feel that no one's watching their back, and they're Monday morning quarterbacks in the White House and in the hierarchy Department of Justice. It has a chilling effect. It causes you to be tentative, to be cautious. The proper way to do this is to let the Inspector General or the Office of Professional Responsibility do what they always do, and that's investigate possible improper procedures followed in investigations. What was done here is John Durham, from all I know, and I know him a little bit when he did his CIA investigation in Virginia, he has an impeccable reputation. Impeccable. I question the motives, which I think were impure, to appoint John Durham. John Durham has integrity, but the reason he was appointed was impure because now we have 3 investigations, basically, of what happened before the election in November of 2016. And I got to say this. If Jim Comey was part of the deep state, why would he have that July 2016 press conference basically trashing Hillary? And why would he issue those 2 letters at the end of the campaign that really a lot of people think caused Hillary to lose? If there was a deep state, doesn't make any sense.
It also doesn't make any sense that this is what we're spending our attention on right now. There's some real questions, and it's just funny, Gene, when you go back, and I was reading some of the history about President Johnson at the time, Andrew Johnson, the impeachment, it was over obstruction. My God, if you separate the years, we're talking about a lot of the same things. Of course, we didn't have Twitter and 24/7 cable news, but the point was that reached a threshold then, and look at what we're doing now. We're not even digging into it. Instead, we're trying to figure out about, as you said, this supposed deep state that we know is a bunch of malarkey. But anyway, Gene, I always appreciate a few minutes with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
All right, everybody, when we come back, more and more states, they're enacting abortion restrictions, some basically total bans outright. We're going to show you just how bad this is getting. Also, we'll be speaking with a woman who is fighting to try to reverse the trend.